What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Christ in Capital, the show that wants to encourage you to love God, love neighbor, and build something. I'm the host, Dustin Johnson, and I have a cool episode for you guys today. It's actually going to be an audio blog episode. I originally was thinking about doing a discussion on the labor theory of value and how we're seeing that pop up in cultural discussions, popular discussions today, and kind of how to think about them from a biblical worldview. But I think it needs to simmer a little bit longer. It might be something that's a little more, it might lend itself better to a two-person discussion rather than just me. So yeah, that one is coming soon. So yeah, we're going to be doing an audio blog episode. It's going to be about the whole concept of healthcare being a human right. Is it a human right or is it not? And so the title of my article probably is going to give it away. It's called "Healthcare is Not a Human Right." So yeah, so we're going to do that. Before we dive into that, though, I wanted to encourage everyone to go over to goodfightoutfitters.com, check it out, buy a t-shirt, buy a hat. We have a lot of cool things coming. I've gotten a few requests to get more women-specific clothing items on there. We have a few, but a lot of the ones that are kind of for women are unisex. They're just kind of for everyone. So we've got some specifically for women coming, and I'm really excited about them. So go get plugged in, go buy a t-shirt, buy a hat, share the website with a friend. We also have a discount code going. The discount code is GoodFight20, I believe. I'll link it in the show notes so everyone can see. GoodFight20 get you 20% off store-wide. So go check it out. Yeah, I think that's it. So let's just let me dive into the episode. I'm just going to read a blog article I wrote. It's been a while back, so there might be some references in here that maybe a little off just because it's is a little while back. But the key points of the article are still super relevant. So yeah, I'll just dive right in. So the blog article, and this is audio blog 3. The article is called "Healthcare is Not a Right." Right at the outset, I've likely triggered a majority of my readers just by the title of this article. I think we can attribute that partially to our cultural knee-jerk reaction to, quote, emote first, ask questions later, and partially to the unstable political climate which we've created in this here land of the free-ish. Let me make a clarification. Healthcare is a positive right, and positive rights do not exist. Rights? Question mark. Let me be upfront. I am a Christian, so all of the thoughts expressed from here on down come out of the presupposition that the Christian worldview is, well, the correct one. And not only that, but I think it is the only worldview that can support any rights whatsoever. I'll explain. When discussing the philosophy of human rights, or legal or natural for that matter, we are essentially talking about entitlements, the things that an individual is due because of X criteria. I, as an individual, am entitled to free speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion, etc. But in these discussions, the question that needs to be answered before we can get anywhere else is, quote, who says? It's a fairly simple question. I have the right to free speech. Who says? I have the right to free association. Who says? I have the right to have my genitals waxed by the innocent, unsuspecting receptionist at the beauty salon. Who says? As far as I can tell, we have 3 options to choose from to answer this question. 1, rights are determined by the individual. 2, rights are determined by a democratic collective. Or 3, rights are endowed by our Creator and are inalienable. And just a little side note, the English language did not use the word rights to refer to this idea of entitlements until about the 17th century, but the underlying concept is evidenced throughout the whole of human history. So the first one was rights are determined by the individual. Rights are not up to the individual. This one goes without saying, but it should be said anyway to eliminate any doubt. Just because the individual declares the right to enter any right here does not actually, quote, speak it into existence. Think about it from the flip side. If rights are left up to the individual to determine, then nobody could ever deny another individual the product of their imagination, no matter how undesirable to the rest of us. Unfortunately, or actually fortunately, I don't think many people, when pressed about it, would agree with this option in the affirmative anyway. Number two was rights are determined by a democratic collective. Rights are not determined by the collective. No matter how diligently society promotes democracy throughout the world, it cannot sustain a system in which the majority vote grants rights to individuals. That's because once you've given authority over rights to the collective, then the same authority can be used to retract said rights, depending on which way the political winds are blowing. The society giveth, the society can taketh away. Besides, we can all think of that one historical event where a collective of people was denied rights because of some irrelevant factor: the period of the American slave trade, the Holocaust, segregation, abortion. And we can all agree, I hope, that collective opinion has no bearing on the intrinsic value of a human being or how human beings should be treated. Number three was rights are endowed by our Creator and are inalienable. Rights are determined by God and cannot be taken away. Yes, I know the concept of human rights is relatively new in human history, as I mentioned earlier, but my assertion is that the things that we call rights are entitlements granted to individuals solely because of their status as God's image bearers. It doesn't matter if you call yourself religious, agnostic, atheistic, etc. When you enter the discussion about rights, you are diving into the realm of the immaterial, the realm of moral imperatives. So to defend rights, or the rights of the individual, as absolute and inalienable, you have to invoke the spiritual. We could engage in an in-depth discussion over the fact that human rights are anchored in the truth that mankind is made in the image of God, but that deserves its own article. Suffice it to say, human beings cannot live consistently in this world while rejecting that God is the foundation of all rights. So the answer to the key question, who says, is God. Now that we know God is the guarantor of rights, let me break the concept down into another categorical framework: positive versus negative. Positive rights. Simply put, a positive right is a so-called right that requires individual B to act in order to grant said right to individual A. There is a positive action required on individual B's behalf, necessarily enslaving him. If someone said, quote, "I have a right to free ice cream," I hope by this point in the article you're aware enough to shout out, "Who says?" That necessarily implies that the grocery store manager and dairy farmer both need to produce regardless of whether it is voluntary or not. These are not rights. They are commands for individual B to act without individual A being on the hook for reciprocity. Imagine yourself in individual B's shoes for a moment. What if someone declared the right to your services? And thank you, Michael Scott, for the imagery that popped into my head. And if you don't get that reference, just type in Google Michael Scott, I declare, and press enter. You'll get it. You may be able to muster up the altruism to comply, but the moment you disagree, you are instantly in a slave-master-slave relationship. It is the same principle as theft, taking someone else's property or labor, and kidnapping, depriving an individual of their freedom so as to act on another's behalf. Neither of these things is treated kindly by God in the scriptures. Negative rights. Negative rights are the opposite of positive rights. The United States Bill of Rights is a great example of this. The right to free speech, the right to freedom of assembly, the right to freedom of press, the right to freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, and so on, are all rights that require individual B to refrain from action. In fact, infringement upon these rights could only occur through aggression or positive action by individual A. And aggression against another one of God's image bearers is an assault against God himself, Genesis 9:6. Before anyone jumps to unwarranted conclusions, this is not an attempt at making the case that these specific rights as laid out in the Bill of Rights are theopneustos, or God-breathed. I am not putting them on the same plane as Scripture, but I am saying the principles that we see propounded throughout the Old and New Testaments more closely resemble these negative rights rather than positive rights. Healthcare a right? ? So healthcare. I can still hear the tagline from the last Democratic Party presidential debate. Healthcare is a human right, as Bernie would say. And it follows from that, he claims, healthcare should be free universally, paid for by the government, that is. But this necessitates that a doctor be forced to care for the patient in a non-voluntary transaction between the doctor and the patient. Some might say, but God says to care for the sick and the poor and the needy, therefore Christians should want universal healthcare. That's partially correct. Christians should be working to be able to provide healthcare to their family and their community, but not because of government mandate. They should do they should do so because they love God and all who bear his image in the world. Imagine that I'm in a room full of doctors and I demand out loud that healthcare is a right and that I am entitled to it free of charge. Okay, now I'm looking around the room full of doctors to see which one is willing to provide the services. None raise their hand because they know the survival of their business depends on making certain returns for their services. A politician to my left selects a doctor of his choice to perform the services, citing the public's opinion that healthcare should be free. He motions to a police officer. The officer walks over, hand on his holster, quote, "Sorry, sir, come with me." In real life, it is a little more polished than this, but be assured, there most definitely is a pistol-backed ultimatum in all forced transactions. I can hear the rebuttal now. The doctor should just be a decent person and provide the services, to which I say, sure, he should. He should love his neighbor as himself. Moreover, I believe that he should, in cooperation with his church and or charity that can provide the funding, help provide the service to the one in need. Isaiah 1:17, Proverbs 14:31, Luke 14:13-14. Even the two greatest commandments speak to this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. But these commands originate with God and ultimately are fueled by the Spirit's working in the lives of regenerate human beings. It genuinely has to come from a new heart. The paradigm shift that needs to occur is one where we stop asking the question, quote, what rights do I have or what am I entitled to? And we start asking, what obligations do I have to my fellow man? What has God commanded of me? The shift has to happen in the heart first. The only thing the state can do is steal and coerce. And if God is not the one commanding and supplying the means for carrying out that command, it's left up to the collective majority or the state to force the minority to act. For the sake of this article, I am disregarding the mathematical and economic blunders that must be embraced to support universal healthcare. And believe me, there are many. I recommend watching the documentary Wait Till It's Free by Colin Gunn. But since I am arguing the morality and not the efficacy of the enterprise, I will refrain from indulging you with my views on the superiority of free market economics. Conclusion. My final conclusion is that healthcare is not a right whereby the state has to extract services from providers, slavery. Rather, it is a moral obligation commanded and accomplished by God himself. There are two authorities vying for your allegiance. Who has the authority to command? Thou shalt. One says, thou shalt care for the needy, Proverbs 31:8-9, Mark 12:31. And I will place my law on their hearts, Jeremiah 31:33. The other says, you better care for the sick and the needy, or else. So the question boils down to which authority, God or the state? Which one is issuing the command? Who says? This has been audio blog number 3. I like everyone to go over and check out goodfightoutfitters.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. Yeah. And until next time, go love God, love neighbor, and build something. Talk to you later.
This has been a Manifold Ministries podcast. For more content, visit us at manifoldministries.com.